So now we're going to cover a bunch of the random stuff that's left in Chapter 1, Section 1, starting with graphing equations by plotting points. Um, so even if you don't know what the graph of an equation is going to look like, you can always get an idea by plugging in values and plotting those points. And it doesn't matter whether uh, the equation is a function or whether it's not a function. We're going to start with one that's a function. F of x equals, let's make it 2x squared minus 1. So we know this is a quadratic, but if we didn't, we would still be able to graph this by figuring out points. And we often do this by what we call a t-table, where you've got your x values and your function values or your y. And we can pick any number. The x is independent, so it doesn't matter what we plug in. I'm going to start with a 0. 0 squared times 2 is 0 minus 1, so that's going to give us a 0, negative 1. So if we're graphing this, x value is 0, y value is negative 1. We've got a point here. We can pick a 1. This gives me 1 squared is 1 times 2 gives me 2. Minus 1 gives me 1. So we've got a value, we've got a point at 1, 1. And we can continue this way. We have to be smart about what we're doing. If we use a 2 at this point, we would get 4 times 2 is 8, minus 1 is 7. So we've got 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, somewhere up here. Now, if I were to connect those dots, this only gives me a partial picture. So if I were smart about it, I would go back and pick some to the left of the 0. So starting with negative 1, squared times 2 is 2, minus 1 is 1. So we've got negative 1, positive 1. And you know that you're going to have other corresponding points as well. So we'll have negative 2, positive 7, negative 2, positive 7. And this gives us a pretty good idea of what's going on. So even if you didn't know that that was a quadratic to begin with, that was going to end up with a parabola, by plugging values in, you can see the direction things are going to go. We can also do this um, for equations that don't represent functions. Let's say we have, sorry, let's try a new screen. So if we've got, let's say, x squared plus y squared equals 4. So this is not a function. We could isolate the y, but we don't really need to at this point. Looking at the x and the y, let's start with 0 again. If x is 0, that's going to give me 0 plus y squared equals 4. Y squared is equal to 4. I would take the square root of both sides, and we'll talk about this again later. Whenever we're taking the square root of a squared variable, you've got to remember that you want to take the positive and the negative. So we've got 2 points here, actually. We've got 0, positive 2, and we've got 0, negative 2. So let's sketch this out here. We've got 0, positive 2, 0, negative 2. Let's start with the y of 0 to do the same thing. So if y is 0, I'm left with x squared equals 4. And taking the square root of both sides again, we'll see that the x this time is going to be plus or minus 2. So that gives a 2, 0, as well as a negative 2, 0. Now, it's hard to tell that this is going to be curved or we can have straight lines. So if all you're doing is doing this by hand, you would want to start plugging in. We would start with the 1, probably get the same thing over here using the 1 here, making sure you're plugging in values. You're going to see that what we've got here is a circle. And again, you want to be smart about what it is that you're plugging in. You're not just plugging in random numbers. So you can start with the easy ones. In this case, the 0 was easy because it gave us integers for the other value. So the things you want to make sure that you're plugging in: 0, fractions, 1 is has some interesting characteristics as well. You want to plug in really big numbers, really small numbers. Make sure you can plug in negatives, and you can see what's going on with the function. And that is graphing equations by plotting points.